Every story leaves something behind, a whisper, a shadow. Welcome to the horror archives. Turn down the lights and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves.
These next 5 stories were all submitted by people who have worked in morgues, places most of us will never see the inside of while we're still breathing. These are their experiences, and I'll warn you now, some of these don't have explanations. This first story is called The Drawer That Was Already Open. It was sent in by a former night attendant at a county morgue in Pennsylvania. He said the job was boring 99% of the time, but that 1% was enough to make him quit. The first thing I noticed when I started my shift was that drawer 7 was pulled out about 2 inches. That might not sound like much, but in a morgue, drawers don't open themselves. I've been working as a night attendant at a county morgue in rural Pennsylvania for about 3 months at that point. It was the kind of job nobody wanted, which is exactly why they gave it to the newest hire, me. The building itself was old, built sometime in the 60s, with that institutional tile floor that squeaks under your shoes no matter how quietly you try to walk, fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered, the smell of formaldehyde so constant you stopped noticing it after the first week, but you never stopped noticing the cold. That night I was alone. The day shift tech, Gerald, had left at 6 and I came on at 7. There was supposed to be overlap, but Gerald never stayed. He always left a clipboard on the desk with a list of what came in and any notes I needed. That night his note just said, Drawer 7, new intake, no ID yet, do not open. I read it twice, do not open. Gerald had never written anything like that before. Usually his notes were things like, family coming at 9 a.m. or autopsy scheduled for morning, never a warning. I told myself it was probably a decomposition case. Sometimes we got bodies that had been sitting in apartments for days, weeks even. Those were the ones you didn't want to open without preparation. Ventilation, a mask, mental readiness. That would explain it, but it didn't explain why the drawer was already cracked open. I walked over to it. The morgue had 12 drawers total, stacked in 2 rows of 6. Drawer 7 was in the bottom row, second from the left. As I got closer, I could see condensation along the metal edge, which was normal. What wasn't normal was the sound, a faint ticking, almost like a watch. I leaned down and put my ear near the gap. The ticking was coming from inside the drawer. I stood back up and checked the intake log on my computer. The body had been brought in at 4:17 p.m. Male, approximate age 40 to 55. Found in a wooded area off Route 6. No cause of death listed yet. No personal effects. No next of kin. I looked back at the drawer. The gap seemed wider now. I know that sounds like my imagination, but I had a very specific reference point. When I first noticed it, the gap was about the width of 2 fingers. Now it looked like 3, maybe 4. I decided to close it. That was my job after all. I walked over, grabbed the handle and pushed. It didn't move. It felt like something was holding it from the inside. Not a latch, not a mechanical failure. Resistance, like pushing against another person's hand. I pushed harder. The drawer slid shut with a heavy metallic clunk, and the ticking stopped. I stood there for a moment, my hand still on the handle, and then I went back to the desk. I tried to do paperwork. I tried to watch something on my phone, but I kept glancing over at drawer 7. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it. A slow metallic scraping sound. I looked up. Drawer 7 was open again, this time about 6 inches. The overhead light nearest to it flickered once and then went out completely, leaving that section of the room in a dim half-shadow. I did not go back over there. I sat at my desk for the remaining 4 hours of my shift with every light I could control turned on, watching that drawer from across the room. It didn't move again, but when Gerald came in the next morning and I told him about it, he just looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "That's why I wrote the note." He never explained what he meant, and when I checked the log later that day, drawer 7 was listed as empty. No record of any intake at 4:17. No record of a body from Route 6. I quit 2 weeks later, not because of what happened, but because I started dreaming about that ticking sound. And in the dreams, I was the one inside the drawer. The next story is one that genuinely unsettled me when I first read it. It's called The Wrong Body. It was submitted by a mortuary science student during her clinical rotation. She found a body that didn't match its records, and what she discovered next made no sense at all. The toe tag said Margaret Elise Combs, age 71, but the body on the table was a young woman, mid-20s at most. I called the front desk to report the mix-up, and no one answered. I was a second-year mortuary science student doing my clinical rotation at a hospital morgue in Memphis. This was my third week, and I was finally allowed to work semi-independently, meaning I could prep bodies for viewing as long as the supervising tech was somewhere in the building. That night, my supervisor was a woman named Dana. She was experienced, quiet, the type who did her work efficiently and didn't make small talk about it after. She told me she'd be upstairs handling paperwork and to page her if I needed anything. The body had come down around 8 p.m. Standard transfer from the 4th floor, geriatric unit. The paperwork matched the toe tag. Margaret Elise Combs, 71. Cause of death, congestive heart failure. Next of kin notified. Viewing scheduled for the following afternoon. Everything was in order, except the body was obviously not a 71-year-old woman. She had dark hair, smooth skin, no wrinkles. Her hands were unworn. There were no surgical scars, no signs of long-term medication use. She looked like she could have been a college student. I paged Dana. No response. I paged her again. Nothing. I tried the front desk again. Still no answer. The hospital wasn't that big. Someone should have been picking up. I decided to verify the wristband. Every patient who dies in the hospital gets a wristband that stays on until the funeral home takes possession. I lifted her left arm to check. There was no wristband. I checked the right arm. No wristband there either. I stepped back and really looked at her for the first time. She was wearing a hospital gown, which was normal. But under the gown, I noticed something. Her chest wasn't moving, which of course it shouldn't be. She was dead. But I could have sworn that when I first walked in and saw her from across the room, I saw it rise. Just once, just slightly. I told myself I was wrong. I went back to the desk and tried the phone one more time. This time someone picked up, but it wasn't the front desk. It was a recording, an old one by the sound of it. A woman's voice reading what sounded like a patient intake form. Name, date of birth, admission date. The voice read the name Margaret Elise Combs. Then it read a date of birth that would have made her 23 years old. The recording ended and the line went dead. I put the phone down. I looked at the body again. She was in the exact same position, but something had changed. Her eyes were open. I hadn't opened them. No one had been in the room. I know sometimes muscles relax and lids can shift, but these eyes were fully open, staring straight up at the ceiling. And they were moving. Not a lot, just small, slow movements. Left, right, then they stopped, fixed on a point directly above her. I followed her gaze to the ceiling. There was nothing there, just water-stained tile and a fluorescent light. When I looked back down, her eyes were closed again. Dana finally answered my page 10 minutes later. She came downstairs and I told her everything. She checked the body, checked the tag, checked the paperwork. Then she pulled up Margaret Elise Combs in the hospital system. The record showed a 71-year-old woman admitted 6 days ago. There was a photo attached to the file from her admission. The photo showed the face of the young woman on our table, exactly as she looked now, 23 at most. Dana stared at the screen for a long time and then closed the file. She told me to go home and that she'd handle the rest of the prep. I found out later that the viewing was canceled. The family said the body wasn't their mother. The hospital launched an internal investigation, but no one could explain where the body of the real Margaret Combs went, or who the young woman on our table actually was. The file photo was never explained. It was just quietly deleted from the system. I finished my rotation at a different facility. This third story comes from someone who worked at a funeral home morgue in Louisiana. It's called Third Shift Visitor, and what he describes, I've actually heard similar accounts from other people who work in morgues. That's what makes it so disturbing to me. Someone buzzed the morgue entrance at 3:15 in the morning, and when I checked the camera, the hallway was empty. Then they buzzed again. I was working overnight at a private morgue, attached to a funeral home in a small town outside of Baton Rouge. It was one of those places that had been family-owned for generations. The building was a converted Victorian house, which meant the morgue was in the basement, accessible through a set of concrete stairs that led to a heavy steel door with a buzzer system. There was a camera above the door, wired to a small monitor at my workstation. The image was grainy, black and white, but you could clearly see the hallway and the first few steps. There was no one there. The buzzer sounded a third time. I pressed the intercom and said, "Can I help you?" No response, just the faint static of the speaker. Then a voice, very quiet, almost a whisper. It said, "I'm here to see my son." I checked the intake log. We had 3 bodies that night: an elderly woman, a middle-aged man who died in a car accident, and a 17-year-old boy who drowned in a bayou 2 days earlier. His family had been notified, but hadn't come in yet. I told the voice through the intercom that visiting hours were by appointment only, and that she could call in the morning to schedule. There was a pause. Then the voice said, "He's cold. Can you put a blanket on him?" Something about the way she said it made my skin tighten. Not because it was threatening, because it was sincere. It was a mother's voice, and she genuinely seemed to believe her dead son was cold. I looked at the camera again. Still no one in the hallway, but the door handle was moving, just slightly, like someone was testing it. I want to be clear, that door was steel. It was locked with a deadbolt and an electronic release that I controlled from my desk. No one was getting through it without my authorization, but the handle kept moving, gently, patiently, like whoever was on the other side had all the time in the world. I pressed the intercom again and said, "Ma'am, there's no one on the camera. I can't open the door if I can't see who's there." The handle stopped moving. Then the voice came through again, and this time it wasn't through the intercom. It was behind me, inside the room. It said, "He's so cold." I turned around so fast I knocked my chair over. The room was empty, just me and the 3 occupied drawers and the stainless steel tables and the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. But it wasn't empty. Not really, because drawer number 3, the one holding the 17-year-old boy, was fogged over. The metal surface was covered in condensation, like the temperature inside had dropped drastically. I walked over to it on legs that didn't feel like mine. I put my hand on the surface. It was ice cold, far colder than it should have been. The refrigeration was set to 38 degrees. This felt like it was below zero. And then I heard breathing, slow, steady, coming from inside the drawer. I did not open it. I backed away, picked up my phone, and called the owner of the funeral home. He answered on the 4th ring, groggy and irritated. I told him what was happening. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Was it a woman's voice?" I said yes. He said, "That happens sometimes with the young ones. Their mothers come looking." I asked him what I should do. He said, "Nothing. She'll leave by sunrise. She always does." She hung up. I sat at my desk with my back against the wall and waited. The breathing from drawer 3 continued until around 5:45 a.m. Then it stopped. The condensation dried. The temperature normalized. When the day shift arrived, I told them what happened. They didn't seem surprised. One of them, an older man named Curtis, just nodded and said, "You get used to it." I never did. I worked there for 4 more months, and on 3 separate occasions I heard the buzzer at odd hours. I never answered it again, but sometimes when I was alone, I could hear her voice somewhere in the walls, always saying the same thing, "He's so cold." Story number 4 is called Inventory Discrepancy. This one was sent in by a morgue technician in Ohio. His job was routine, until one night the numbers didn't add up. And what happened after that, he still can't explain. We had 9 bodies logged in the system, but when I did the physical count, there were 10. I counted again. 10. I was the overnight morgue technician at a county medical examiner's office in northern Ohio. The building was modern, built in the 2000s, all clean lines and bright lighting. Nothing creepy about it, at least not architecturally, but the job itself was inherently unsettling, and you either got comfortable with death or you found other work. I'd been there almost 2 years, and I thought I was comfortable. That night I was doing the routine inventory check we performed at the start of every overnight shift. 9 bodies were logged. I walked the row of drawers and counted. 10 were occupied. I opened each drawer and cross-referenced the toe tags. All 9 logged bodies were accounted for. They were exactly where they were supposed to be. The 10th body was in drawer 16, which according to every record I had access to was supposed to be empty. I opened it slowly. Inside was a woman. She appeared to be in her 30s. She had no toe tag, no wristband, no identification of any kind. She was nude, which wasn't unusual for incoming bodies, but there was no intake sheet, no transport record, no chain of custody documentation. She simply existed in our morgue with no paper trail. I called my supervisor, Dr. Pallard. He told me to photograph the body, document everything I could observe, and he'd come in first thing in the morning to sort it out. He said it was probably an administrative error, a body brought in during shift change that someone forgot to log. It happened occasionally. I took the photos. I noted what I could. Female, approximately 30 to 35. No visible cause of death. No tattoos, no surgical scars. Light brown hair, pale skin. I estimated she'd been dead for at least 12 hours based on lividity, but something about her color didn't look right. She wasn't the grayish pallor I was used to seeing. She looked almost pink. Healthy, if that word can apply to a corpse. I closed the drawer and went back to my desk. About an hour later, I heard a sound from the storage area. A soft thump, like something shifting weight. I went to check and found that drawer 16 was open about a foot. The body had moved. She had been lying flat on her back with her arms at her sides. Now her left arm was draped off the edge of the tray, hanging down, fingers almost touching the floor. Post-mortem movement happens. Gas buildup, muscle contraction, gravity. I knew this. I repositioned her arm and closed the drawer. 30 minutes later, another thump. I went back. The drawer was open again. Her arm was hanging off the tray again, but this time it was the right arm, and her head was turned to the side, facing the door, facing me. I repositioned her again. I closed the drawer firmly, and I dragged a chair in front of it, not because I thought a chair would stop anything. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I just needed to feel like I was doing something. I went back to my desk. I didn't hear another thump, but at around 4 in the morning, I got up to use the restroom. To get there, I had to pass the storage area. The chair was still in front of drawer 16. The drawer was still closed, but drawer 15, the one directly next to it, was now open, and it was supposed to be empty too. I looked inside. There was nothing in the drawer, but the surface of the metal tray was warm, not room temperature. Warm, like someone had been lying on it very recently. I checked the log again. 15 was empty. It had been empty for days. I closed it and went back to my desk, and I did not move again until morning. When Dr. Pallard arrived and opened drawer 16, it was empty, completely empty. No body, no residue, no evidence anyone had ever been in there. He looked at me like I was losing my mind. I showed him the photos I'd taken. They were on my phone, or they should have been. The gallery showed I had taken 11 photos at the time stamps I remembered, but every single image was black. Not dark, not blurry, perfectly, uniformly black, like the camera had captured nothing at all. Dr. Pallard filed it as an inventory error, but I know what I saw. I know what I touched, and I know that whatever was in drawer 16 that night left on its own. This last story is the one that made me hesitate before including it. It's called The Mouth. It was sent in by a forensic autopsy assistant in New Mexico. I'll just let him tell it. The body on the table had been dead for 9 days, but his mouth was clean. No decomposition, no discoloration, nothing. Just his mouth. Everything else was consistent with 9 days of death. I need to explain why that terrified me. I was a forensic autopsy assistant at a state medical examiner's office in New Mexico. The body had been found in an abandoned building on the edge of the desert. A homeless man with no identification. Cause of death appeared to be exposure. He'd been brought in as a routine case. Nothing special, nothing that should have made me dread coming to work every day for the next 3 weeks. The lead pathologist, Dr. Kessler, noticed the mouth anomaly during the external examination. She noted it in her report, but didn't seem particularly concerned. Unusual preservation of the oral cavity, she wrote. Possible environmental factors, but that didn't explain it. The building where he was found was hot, dry, over 100 degrees during the day. Decomposition should have been uniform. If anything, the mouth should have been one of the first areas to deteriorate. Bacteria, moisture, soft tissue. It should have been worse than the rest of him, not better. I was the one who had to hold the jaw open while Dr. Kessler examined the interior of the mouth. His teeth were perfect, not just preserved. Perfect, white straight, no cavities. This was a man who, by all appearances, had lived on the streets for years. His hands were rough, his feet were blistered and calloused, but his teeth looked like a toothpaste commercial. And they were warm. The inside of his mouth was warm. Dr. Kessler noticed it too. She pulled her hand back and looked at me. Neither of us said anything. She took a temperature reading of the oral cavity, 94.6 degrees. The rest of the body was ambient temperature, around 60 degrees, consistent with refrigerated storage. But his mouth was nearly living temperature. She documented it. We moved on to the internal examination. When she made the Y incision and opened the chest cavity, everything inside was exactly what you'd expect from a 9-day-old corpse. Organs in advanced decomposition, tissue breaking down. The smell was significant, but the mouth continued to be pristine. We finished the autopsy, and I placed the body back in storage. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I came in early the next morning, before anyone else arrived. I don't know why. I told myself I wanted to check something. I opened the drawer and unzipped the bag. His mouth was open. It hadn't been open when I stored him. I always close the jaw and secure it with a chin strap before storage. The chin strap was undone, and his mouth was open wide, wider than a jaw should open. The mandible looked almost dislocated. The mouth stretched into a perfect dark oval. I leaned closer, which I know was stupid. I leaned closer because I heard something, a sound coming from inside his throat. Not breathing. Not gas. It was a voice, very faint, very far away, like someone was speaking from the bottom of a deep well. I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of speech. Someone talking, calmly, steadily, like they were reading something aloud. I stumbled backward and hit the counter behind me. The voice stopped. The mouth didn't close. I left the room and waited in the hallway until Dr. Kessler arrived. I told her what I'd seen and heard. She didn't dismiss me. She went in and looked for herself. The mouth was still open. She listened. She said she didn't hear anything, but she also didn't tell me I was wrong. She just closed the jaw, resecured the strap, and said we should release the body to the state for burial as soon as possible. The paperwork took 3 days. During those 3 days, I checked the body every morning. Every morning the mouth was open again, the chin strap undone, and every morning the mouth was wider. By the 3rd day, his jaw was stretched so far that the skin at the corners of his lips had begun to split. But there was no blood. The tears in the skin were clean and dry, almost like the mouth was designed to open that far, like it was meant to. On the 2nd night, one of the janitors quit. He told the front desk he'd heard someone talking in the morgue at 2 in the morning. He said it sounded like a man reciting names, just a long, slow list of names. He said he listened for about 30 seconds, and then he heard his own name. That was when he left. He didn't come back. The body was released on a Thursday. I watched them load it into the transport van. The driver, a guy I'd seen a dozen times, was casual about it until he got to the back of the van. He paused. He looked at me and said, "Is this one making noise?" I asked him what he meant. He said, "I can hear something, like talking." I told him I didn't know what to say. He drove away. I never found out where the body was buried. The case file was closed as John Doe, cause of death exposure. No next of kin, No follow-up. But about a month later, I was working late, alone in the morgue, and I heard it again. The voice, faint, rhythmic, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once, reading names. I listened for 10 seconds, and then I pulled out my earbuds and put on music as loud as I could. I didn't want to hear my name. I still work there. I still hear it sometimes. Always late. Always when I'm alone. I've started wearing earbuds for my entire shift. My coworkers think I just like podcasts. The truth is I am terrified of silence in that room. Because in the silence, someone is always talking. And I am certain that one night, I'm going to hear what they're saying. And it's going to be meant for me. Those were 5 true morgue horror stories. If you have a story of your own, you can send it to me. The link is in the description. Stay safe out there.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.